humanity is great, for the economy narrowly is less material. We all were able to divest from Russia relatively easily and quickly and uneventfully. The danger with regards to the situation in the Middle East is obviously if it escalates materially, given how important the region is as a net energy exporter. But I think if you were to be predicting 2024, 2025 corporate profits, I don't think the impact is in a mathematical sense necessarily material. It is, incredibly important in the context of the world and humanity and where we're going to be. But obviously, there is huge tail risk. You can see Hezbollah engaging potential conflict with Iran. The left tail is big and ugly, but I think the expected case in terms of how it's going to impact economic growth, corporate profitability, employment, and the like will be modest. It'll just be a horrific humanitarian crisis.
Do we hear that across the panel?
I think there are some second order effects. I agree with that in terms of the immediate response, but and also we've learned from I think the response to the situation in Israel is informed with the initial response to Ukraine. So when Russia went into Ukraine, obviously energy prices went up enormously. I remember sort of thinking this is bound to be short-term pain, of course. But effectively, Russia going into Ukraine didn't increase the demand for oil globally. It possibly reduced it. But all the plumbing was going to the wrong places. The pipes were going to Germany, they needed to get changed to go to India or needed to, so all of the wiring had to be changed. And we did that in a period of time and things stabilised. And I think the lesson probably from that was don't panic too much. We'll find a way to reroute and to make things happen. It could obviously be much more significant if some of the big oil producers get pulled into the conflict. But I think the second order effects are people start worrying, policymakers are starting to worry about their dependence. So, I think it was a colossal policy mistake for Germany to close down all its nuclear reactors, not think about its dependence on Russia and what have you. And I think they've largely acknowledged that was a major policy mistake. But there's lots of other issues that could become massive in the world. Things like the fact that I know there's fancy chips like made by NVIDIA for artificial intelligence and so on, but 90% of Common Garden chips are manufactured in Taiwan. That's how did we get here? Really, in terms of talking about economic resilience, how did we allow ourselves to get into this situation where in a sort of geopolitically unstable area we're so dependent? And so a lot of people are starting to think more about just-in-case delivery instead of just-in-time. That is inflationary. It's one of the reasons why I don't think we're going to lick inflation that quickly, because governments need to borrow more, because governments are spending money less efficiently, and because of this change in the supply mechanism where it's about contingency rather than just delivery on time. So I think the second order effects could be quite profound, but longer term.
I think from an aviation perspective, the answer could be yes. It may be overestimated, it may be underestimated. But when it comes to transportation, aviation infrastructure, these are decade-long, multi-billion-dollar plays. The assets that we build are going to last 30 to 40 years. We build them today in a way that they should be flexible and future-proof to be able to accommodate quick or slow changes in global policies, harmonization of travel, volatility in passenger levels. We've certainly seen the most extreme case of that ever during the global pandemic. And as I said earlier, here we are, less than 4 years later, with an industry that in most domestic and international sectors is over 100% recovered from 2019. So, the aviation sector resiliency has proven itself time and time again in the midst of some pretty significant global threats. That said, the health of the industry to be able to recover faster is extremely connected to global policy, to an understanding of what we ought to be doing better. We ought to have more clarity around harmonization of travel policies, of moving to the industry together, whether that's energy providers, airlines, aircraft manufacturers, airports, and then the infrastructure investors, like you all in this room, working together to establish a cohesive vision to transition the industry towards digitalization, towards the greening of the industry in a methodical but yet swift manner. The more we're aligned on those principles and practices, is the stronger the industry is going to be, the stronger the returns will be. And again, the importance, especially during these difficult political times, is the human connection and the trade that needs to happen between all of our countries.
Ben, I don't know if you want to make a comment, but I want to pivot more like the word that's been used a lot this morning. And given your particular focus on China, of course, you just talked about China. I'm not going to get into what's the current lay of the land on Taiwan, etc. I think we'll just park that. The question I do want to ask is, I've been going to China for 37 years. I was there a month ago, I'm going to be there again in a few weeks. I spent a lot of time in China over the years and done business in China. I worry about the huge gap that's been created between the West and China. I think it's overplayed and overdone. And somebody who spent 20 years in political life, I think there are real issues, there are real differences, we shouldn't ignore that. But disengagement is going backwards. I mean, Kissinger got us engaged, Pierre Trudeau and next to Canada got us engaged, and now we're going completely the other way. And I don't think you can ignore, as those who manage funds, the second largest economy in the world, and the role it will continue to play going forward. How do you think about the opportunity to invest in that part of the world, but specifically China?
So I think recently there's a lot of news from our vintage from the West, right? The mainstream media coverage of China. In my sense, I came back myself too about a month ago. I think the economy stabilized and actually I see some upticking now. The policy response has been quite measured and very targeted. That gave me the sense that they don't want to do what they did in the global financial crisis in 2009, just how many trillions out of non-discriminated all sectors, every region received money. But I think I'm very targeted on sector, a certain geographic region now. The deflation, I see inflation coming back a little bit now. Totally, I agree with Elon. When I first saw the deflation number a few months ago, I was like, wow, given the demographic in China and deflation, China really headed into the middle income trap. So I got a sense that China is trying to avoid the middle income trap. Given that size of the economy, if they can achieve it, that would be marvelous. Doing business in China is hard. I mean, it's the second largest economy, getting closer in a way I call US way on 25, China 17, 18, Japan's around 10, maybe even not 10, but Japan the third. But if you look at EU as a bloc, that is larger than Japan. We talk about economic growth and inflation. Deglobalization is bad for economic growth and also bad for inflation. We call low growth and high inflation. That's almost a definition of globalization. The benefit of globalization is increased productivity, hold down the price, and the deglobalization inflicted, right? So if you purely from economic development and globalization perspective, the US needs China, China needs the US from economic perspective. But your point, you made a very good point. There is an ideological difference between the two. And can we resolve or coexist with a different ideology?
The good news is we've had 4 U.S. cabinet secretary level folks who've been to China over the last, call it 30, 45 days, which is a sign of beginning the dialogue again. That's a constructive thing. Any comment, George, on this question of China?
As a U.S. headquartered firm, there are two questions that caused me to hide under the table when raised. One is China, and the other is ESG. given where we are.
Let's hear some more.
Given where we are in the political season, and as we're leading up into elections, they're just, they're particularly fraught conversations. On China, I think a lot has changed. I think essentially investments from at least the U.S. into China PE will decrease dramatically, and it's almost uninvestable because you don't know what the rules of the game will be 12 years from now or whenever it is you're forecasting an exit. I think the administration's policy of small garden, high walls, and clarity is a valuable one. Tell folks what the rules are and being focused. I think unfortunately what you see out of many in Congress is trying to foster. Interestingly, folks on the right are trying to do the same thing that they accuse those on the left of doing on the ESG front, which is just using the bully pulpit, but failing to establish rules and norms. I think there will be pressure on things like index investments. We've created a retirement system in the U.S. where folks are basically forced savers into largely passive products. So there's a lot of money that's invested into China where people aren't making an affirmative decision to do that. And you've seen some investment in the federal thrift plan. I think there'll be pressure there. That having been said, we have a growing business. We're managing Chinese assets for Chinese investors. I think that represents a good opportunity. We just launched a green bond fund in China. China still contributes 30% of global emissions. It's the same air that we all breathe. I think we can play a responsible role in helping China decarbonize their economy. And so I'm hopeful that as we get through the election, calmer heads will prevail. I think I agree with Ben. The world will be a better place as and when we're able to engage more rationally with one another. But it's an incredibly fraught, challenged discussion and just very raw environment right now.
Understood.
On China, I think this comes into this divergence theme that China obviously had a massive percentage of its GDP in investment, probably an unsustainable level, and it's gradually trying to move from being an investment economy to more of a consumption economy, more circular within itself. And that's, to some extent, with a command and control type economy, it's easy to drive investment. It's harder to persuade households to spend money unless they feel really secure and so on. But I think there's every reason they might achieve that. The containment strategy from the US, and I think China in some sense is responding to policy in the US, where obviously first with Trump you had all of the sanctions and so on, and then the Inflation Reduction Act, which is really about bringing investment away from places like China back onshore. So China, quite reasonably, is trying to make sure that things are made in China, manufactured there, bought there, consumed there. The containment strategy to try and avoid China getting technology is failing. We've seen Huawei's got 7 nanometer technology now in their phones. So you're going to get this two-track world where largely the same technology but on different systems operates in different parts of the world. So we're going to have divergence there. In terms of as an investment destination, we actually prefer non-China Asia at the moment. Very, very open to trade, unlike the rest of the world. Trade in Southeast Asia and intra-Asia trade is actually increasing as a percentage of global trade. And there's some really, really smart policies there that are going to grow those economies, plus they've got demographics in their favor.
Let me switch subjects if I can and talk about AI, because we're swiftly running